What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So it's Tier List Tuesday. Every single Tuesday we do a tier list on this page, and I thought, considering free agency is only 3 weeks away, that we would go down memory lane of the 2020s and look at some of the biggest unrestricted free agency signings where guys change teams and tier list them. We're looking at 35, I believe, ranking them in order of AAV. No 1 or 2 year deals. These are 3-year deals or more serious, sizable deals. Like looking at the John Klingberg 1-year deal at $7 million. Yeah, it fucking sucked, but it was only 1 year. So we're going to put some term on it. No Dmitry Orlov kind of deal. Let's get into it. Here are the tier lists. We are the tiers. I kind of changed it up instead of the usual great, good. I said absolute steal, good deal, solid signing, slight overpay, and then utter disaster. Up first, Dougie Hamilton. I'm going to go with a solid signing. Gaudreau's actually the highest paid one. He should have been first, but Hamilton, he's a solid signing when looking at him. $9 million. Yes, this year he dealt with injuries. His first year wasn't that impressive, but when Dougie Hamilton is fully healthy, like that second season, what did he have? 74 points. He's worth $9 million. Now, it's going to be interesting how this deal ages, considering the Devils have so many fantastic young defensemen coming up: Simone Nemec, Luke Hughes, and Seamus Casey. So I'm not sure that the end of this deal is going to be good, but when he's healthy, when he's playing to the level that he's capable of, he is a legit top 15, even top 10 defenseman in the entire NHL. And that's what New Jersey wanted. And last year was a perfect example of Dougie Hamilton at his finest. And I think he's going to bounce back next season. So I'm going to go with a solid signing for Dougie Hamilton. Now, when looking at Johnny Gaudreau, it's definitely a slight over. Right now, it's a slight overpay. So I think I'm actually going to go with utter disaster, considering he has, 5 years left at $9.75 million. This guy didn't even break the 15 goal mark this season, finished with 60 points. It's not looking good. He's 30 years old. He's on the decline. He's nowhere close to a $9.75 million player. He's probably closer to a $7.5, maybe even $7 million player right now. So it's been an utter disaster for the Columbus Blue Jackets. They've been one of the worst teams in the entire NHL since he signed this deal. Straight up utter disaster. Alex Pietrangelo, some people are going to scream absolute steal just because they won a Stanley Cup. It's a good deal. It's definitely a good deal. Alex Pietrangelo has been that number one defenseman as advertised. Maybe not the best defensive guy, but at the end of the day, Vegas Golden Knights have won a Stanley Cup with him. Without that said, it's a good deal. Maybe a slight overpayment right now with 4 years left on it at $8.8 million. But the Vegas Golden Knights are still walking away, even if he falls off a cliff, and saying that was a good deal for our team. Nazem Kadri. It's interesting, dude, because if he signed this with a different team, I would say good deal. But he was fantastic this year. He was well worth. He was a steal in terms of this year. But for the Calgary Flames that are now doing this retool, I'm going to go with the solid signing. He's going to be a good mentor for some of the younger players in terms of helping them develop. But yeah, you signed him to stay competitive after Tkachuk and Johnny Gaudreau left your team. You signed Nazem Kadri expecting for him to play high-level playoff hockey, but that has not been the case. So now it's kind of in a weird... I am factoring in some team fit with this. So with Nazem Kadri, it's a solid signing. It's the back end of this might not be good right now. It's a very good deal, but you're not actually playing meaningful hockey. So it's a solid signing overall. Torrey Krug is definitely an overpayment. It was initially 7 years at $6.5 million. 2 years in, they try to trade him to Philadelphia. His no movement clause that Armstrong gave him, he says, no, hell no. And at this point, he's like a half a point per game. I don't even think he was half a point per game this year. And horrendous defensively at $6.5 million. That's legit top pair money. Torrey Krug is like a third pair offensive defenseman at this point. Utter disaster for the St. Louis Blues. Claude Giroux, see, it's tough because if I factor in the team, he hasn't been that good, but he has been well worth $6.5 million over the last 2 years, but the Senators haven't... I'm going to move both up. No, forget what I said. I got to put Claude Giroux in an absolute steal, but if I am going to factor in team play, when looking at Claude Giroux, he has been a legit first liner through his first 2 years for the Ottawa Senators, a great mentor for Brady Tkachuk and Tim Stützle on that top line. It was an absolute steal for the Ottawa Senators. He has held up his end of the bargain. Alex Killorn, I can't go utter disaster because it's only a 4-year deal. It's only $6.25 million. This first year definitely was disappointing. It's going to end up being a slight overpay. I think Alex Killorn the next 3 years is going to be an effective middle six kind of mentor for all the Anaheim Ducks young forwards. Not an utter disaster just because the term really isn't there and Anaheim's not really quite trying to win now. He's brought in to be a veteran. An overpay for sure at $6.25 million, but we all agreed in the moment that it was an overpay. Not ideal. Jacob Markstrom, Good deal. Definitely a good deal when looking at him signing this deal, going from Vancouver to Calgary. He has been worth the money, a little bit up and down, but when looking in 2022, massive for them. Vezina runner-up. They end up winning division this year. Very good as well. It's a good deal. 6 years, $6 million, and they might be able to move off him and still get some assets for him, even with 2 years left at $6 million and given his age. Andre Palat, you can... Ooh, I think Palat's going to bounce back a little bit in New Jersey. Do I think he's ever going to be worth $6 million? No, not quite there, but I can't say it's a full-on disaster for Andre Palat. I think he's going to bounce back next year. Philip Grubauer, though, this is an utter disaster for the Seattle Kraken. He was brought in to be the guy on a 6-year deal at $5.9 million. Has not put up nearly a single season of even being an average starting goalie. I believe he's been under a .900 save percentage every single year that he's been in Seattle. And now, at this point, Joey Daccord has stolen his job. He has 3 years left at $5.9 million. Not good for Seattle. Vincent Trocheck, this is looking like an absolute steal. Trocheck was 7 years at $5.625 million, which a lot of people thought the AAV was a pretty solid deal, but the term was going to be a little bit risky. But when looking at him this year, first year, solid, 60 points. But this year, him, Lafreniere, Panarin formed one of the best lines in the entire NHL. He was around the point per game player and even better in the playoffs, so clutch for the New York Rangers. So even though maybe the final year or two of this deal, I think at $5.6 million, even at the end of that, that's not going to be that much. That's going to be like high-end third line money. So for the New York Rangers, this was an absolute steal of a deal. Andrew Kopp, slight overpay, okay middle sixer. I can't really say it's a full-on disaster. I think he will bounce back a little bit this year, but not that good of a deal by Steve Yzerman. Zach Hyman, also in the absolute steal. I don't really put these rows in order, but he would definitely be number one. One of the best signings of the entire 21st century. 7 years at $5.5 million. First year was kind of middle of the pack, 55-ish points. Maybe a little bit disappointing because he was playing in the top six. Then he was point per game last year. This year, 50 goddamn goals. In the playoffs has, 14 goals already or something ridiculous like that. Zach Hyman has been well worth 5.5, and I think he's also going to age pretty well on that deal. Philip Deneau, I'll go with solid. Again, this guy's a very good defensive second line center. Doesn't bring a ton offensively, so at $5.5 million, you can maybe move it up to a good deal. It's somewhere in between a solid signing and a good deal. I wouldn't say he's like a $6.57 million player, maybe 6 to 6.5, but definitely a solid signing by the LA Kings, and they probably shouldn't have signed PLD, especially with Philip Deneau on the roster. We got Jaden Schwartz. This was 5 years, $5.5 million. Slight overpay. He has not really lived up to it. It seems like he's somewhat coming down towards the end of his career. Andre Burakovsky, exact same deal. I think Burakovsky, when healthy, this is going to be a solid signing. When he is healthy, he's around the 60-ish point guy. He just has not been able to stay healthy with the Seattle Kraken, so that's definitely a concern. But when healthy, I would argue it's even a good deal, but he hasn't stayed healthy. Darcy Kemper. Kemper kind of has been a little bit of a disaster. I think Kemper is going to bounce back, but I don't know. It's not even going to be his net next season, considering how good Charlie Lindgren played this season. So I'm going to go slightly kind of a disaster. When looking at it, first season was solid. This year, very disappointing. And going forward, what is he, 32, 33 at this point? It's looking like a little bit of an utter disaster. JT Compher, solid signing, very reliable, solid second-line center, $5.1 million for the next 5 years. Perfectly solid signing by Steve Yzerman. TJ Brody, I feel like he's going to get a lot of shit for this. People are going to want him in slight overpay or utter disaster. The last year was not good, but the first 3 years in Toronto making $5 million, he was one of the best defensemen in the entire NHL. Yes, it ended so poorly, but before last season, we probably would have had him in good deal, so I'm going to bump him down to solid signing. Jack Campbell, that's kind of an obvious. I got to small and make my camera smaller. It's going to spill over. But when looking at Jack Campbell, obviously horrendous. 5 years, $5 million. Not good for the Edmonton Oilers. Stuart Skinner had to emerge and turn into somewhat of a starter for them, and their goaltending has been a massive problem of the McDavid era. Evgeny Dadonov, also an utter disaster. 3 years at $5 million for the Ottawa Senators. I know I have him in the picture of the Dallas Stars. I didn't really have the old photo of him. But yeah, he signed with Ottawa, did not produce at all, ends up getting traded. They don't disclose the no-trade clause, and then they lose a first-round pick. So this might be the most disastrous signing in terms of not only on the ice and off the ice. Lose a goddamn... They shouldn't have lost a first-round pick. For being honest, it should have been like a second-round pick. That was fucking ridiculous. But Dadonov in Ottawa, disaster. When looking at Linus Ullmark, Also an absolute steal. First season had like a 915, was a very good 1A, 1B, then wins the Vezina. This year, stepped down a little bit, but still had like a 914 and was a very good 1B to Jeremy Swayman. And he has 1 year left where I think he's going to get traded and yet again probably be a top 12 goalie in the entire NHL wherever he goes. Ryan Strome, I mean, he's like a 40-ish point guy for $5 million. His defensive numbers are pretty horrible, but everybody's on Anaheim's are. He can maybe bounce back and get a 50-point season at some point, but it definitely is an overpay. It's actually crazy how much Jacob Markstrom, I was doing this, and Jacob Markstrom and Blake Coleman look identical. But this is Blake Coleman. This is not Jacob Markstrom, I swear to God. Blake Coleman, I initially, coming into this season, this deal was not looking very good. It was 4 years, 6 years, $4.9 million, only had 38 points. But this year, he was fantastic for them. He had 30 goals. I am going to move it up to good deal. It's going to be interesting to see how he ages. He has 4 years left on this, and he is 31 or 32 years old right now. So it might age bad, but right now, he has been a fantastic second liner for the Calgary Flames. I'm going to go with good deal. Ben Sherratt, kind of an utter disaster. This guy's not very good. Somehow he got 4 years at $4.75 million from the Detroit Red Wings. He's a low-end second pair defenseman, high-end third pair, so that is not good. Jamie Alexiak, I'm going to go, he was 5 years at $4.6 million. I'm going to go solid signing, a pretty solid defenseman, big, physical, imposing guy. Okay signing for the Seattle Kraken. Chris Tanev, this was a 4-year deal at $4.5 million, initially going from Vancouver to Calgary. First 3 years in Calgary, fantastic defenseman, one of the best defensive defensemen in the entire NHL. This year as well, splitting time between Calgary and Dallas, also was fantastic at only $4.5 million. He was probably worth around 6.5, considering just how good he was defensively. I think that this was an absolute steal by the Calgary Flames. Mason Marchment, good deal. First year was a little bit disappointing. Only had 31 points in 68 games. This year, 53 points in like 73 games. He really came alive with that second line. So at only $4.5 million, he's definitely a very good second liner that would get 6.5 right now. Brendan Saad, I'm going to go solid signing. This was $4.5 million over 5 or 6 years. His underlying numbers are actually pretty solid. He's been producing around 50-ish point pace every single year on this deal. St. Louis isn't that good of a team, so it's not like you really hear him talked about that much, but it was an okay signing at $4.5 million. Ryan O'Reilly, absolute steal, no doubt. 4 years, $4.5 million. When looking at Ryan O'Reilly this year, I think he got to the 70-point mark while being fantastic defensively. Legit number one center this year on maybe the surprise team of the entire NHL, at least those that ended up making the playoffs. He was fantastic. 3 more years. Yes, he is starting to get up there in age, but even if he takes even if he falls off like 15% the next 3 years, he's still going to be worth north of $4.5 million in that final year. He was worth like $8, maybe even $9 million this year for Nashville. Alex Wenberg, this was a $4.5 million deal. I'm going to go like a slight overpay when looking at Wenberg. Perfect. He's a solid defensive third-line center. Is that worth $4.5 million? Maybe, I don't know. It doesn't really generate a ton of offense. Mike Hoffman, this was the $4.5 million deal that he signed with the Canadiens. I am going to go with a little bit of a disaster. Not that good of a player with Montreal. Tyler Toffoli, $4.25 million deal. Over 4 years. This was initially signed with Montreal. Then he got traded to Calgary. Then he got traded to New Jersey. Then he got traded to Winnipeg. This year, he was around the 70-point guy throughout this entire deal. So at only $4.25 million, like 30 goal, 40 assist, 70-point pace throughout this deal. It was a fantastic signing by Montreal, even though they didn't have him for the entire time. Korpisalo, utter disaster. You probably saw him in the thumbnail of this video. 5 years, $4 million. Not good by the Ottawa Senators here. And then Goodbranson, he also goes in utter disaster. 4 years, $4 million. Basically a bottom pairing defenseman. So when looking at it, let me hide my camera. Here it is. Here is the full list. A lot of utter disasters if you're catching a trend. Usually don't give guys in their late 20s, early 30s long-term deals. But yeah, let me know in the comments. What do you think about this? Who would you move up? Who would you move down? I'll be seeing the next one.